I'm going to do a beer review for you. A beer review for you. And for me too, because I've never had this beer before. Ever. No idea. The only idea what this beer tastes like or going to taste like is just from what I've read. That it's a Maibock, M-A-I-B-O-C-K. Mai being German for the month of May, or a late springtime Bock as it traditionally was. German style ale, more specifically Bavarian, southern Germany. Some of my ancestors supposedly came from that area. Some of them, most not, but some did. But I have been there drinking Maibock. Years ago. I went there specifically with the mission to drink their beer in May. So I am familiar with the style, and I liked it. It was, I don't know, it's kind of different. The Maibock I'm going to cover tonight is brewed not in Bavaria, but in Southern California at Rogue Brewery. And which I understand was, never mind. It was just acquired by a larger brewery, I think. Regardless, this kind of, the label kind of catches your attention, It's pretty artsy in kind of a Grateful Dead kind of way. Rogue Brewery's Maibock. Or it's called Dead Guy Ale. Yep. Dead Guy Ale. Alright, I'm not going to stand up. I think you can see it just fine. These guys are going to have to stand up. Alright, so here's the can. I'll get some more light on that scene here. Yeah, the can really catches your attention. It's kind of attractive package, you might say. Distinguished. Rogue Brewery's Dead Guy Ale. And I know a little bit of the history behind the label and the name. I read up on it. And hopefully it tastes better than like a dead guy. I don't know. But there's the can. You've probably seen it. I live in New York, and it's fairly common here in New York, even in the small town in New York where I live, not New York City by a long shot. Not by a long shot. Back to the candles. Or dollar store ambiance, as I say. I'll read to you what I got on this beer. It carries a pretty good, not a flawless review. There's Beer Advocate that I follow where you can read what people think of this beer from all over the world, whoever's had it. And they're pretty blunt, usually. And it carries a pretty decent review, 88%. Okay, Dead Guy Ale, all right? 6.8% alcohol by volume, 40 IBUs, International Bitterness Units, and 16.5 SRM. All right, International Bitterness Units, 40 tells me that it's going to be a fairly bitter beer. There are a lot of hops, maybe not bitter, but the hops presence is there at 40. And with the 6.8 alcohol by volume, it's going to need it to offset it, unless they're shooting for kind of a malt liquor kind of beer, and they're not. It's a Maibock. 16 SRMs. SRMs, I don't know what SRM stands for, I'm sorry, but I know it has to do with the color of the beer, where a very, very light colored beer would be a very low number, like maybe 4 SRMs, where a stout may be 32 or 40. This is 16, so I'm expecting maybe a dark orange, amber colored beer. That's going to be fairly malty, but it's going to have a lot of hops up front too. That's what I'm expecting from that information. Ingredients. I got this off their website. 2-row C15 and Munich malts. I have no idea what C15 is. I stopped brewing 10, 15 years ago and got out of it. A lot of new stuff coming out. Really good beers and new malts, designer hops and malts. Munich malt they put in this, which is very traditional for this beer. Does come, it's usually a German malt. They say they put in Pearl and Sterling hops, which are very old, traditional, they say noble hops. They're not German hops, Pearl and Sterling. I'm pretty sure they're not, but they're a fairly strong hop. It says free-range coastal water. And Pac-Man yeast. I've never heard of Pac-Man. Like the game Pac-Man, they use Pac-Man yeast in it. And the yeast that you use in a beer will have a lot to do with the flavor and quality of the beer. Very distinguishing, almost like a thumbprint signature on any beer or wine would be the yeast. And just wanted to add that. So this is what they wrote about it briefly. And these aren't my words. Anyway, it's a beer that always jumped off the shelf because of its awesome brand design. Brand design, meaning this can, which does kind of grab your eye. It doesn't have any words on the front. Just this really artsy, Grateful Dead looking dead guy. Right, yeah, it's pretty artsy. So the company legend goes, the Dead Guy was a custom bottle created to celebrate a Mayan Day of the Dead for a Tex-Mex restaurant in Portland back in 1990 called Casa Ubecha, which has since been shuttered. And that's all they really have to say about it. So, Dead Guy, the name of the beer and the label, they made this in 1990 for a Tex-Mex restaurant in Portland. And I got to stand corrected. This is I think a Portland beer, where it's brewed. I said California. I will put it up here. A long day. It's pretty late. So that's all they have to say about it. The name and label were made in 1990 specifically for a Mayan festival at a Tex-Mex restaurant. That restaurant's no longer around. But the beer did so well, basically, from what I've read, that and a few other things, that they kept the label and the name because it kind of established itself and they didn't think they should change it, which I think was probably a pretty good move, business move, nothing else. So, I want to say also that this beer has won a lot of awards, even recently, through the years. 2011 World Beer Championship Gold. 2012 World Beer Championship Gold. 2013 it won World Beer Championship Silver. 2014 again the silver for that. 2015 World Beer Championships. It won the gold again in 2015. 2015 Great International Beer and Cider Competition. It took first place. 2016 World Beer Championships took the gold again. 2017 World Beer Awards, Best of U.S. Bock Style. 2018 World Beverage Competition, it took the Platinum Award, this beer. Expecting great things. Great things. Well, I broke out this mug that I haven't drank out of in quite a few years. But, my Bock, alright. My Bock. Bock is a style of beer. It means May, so it was traditionally brewed as a beer made in late May. There's more for the reason for that. The style started out in the 13th century. Smells sweet. I get malt, not hops. Yeah, malt. I don't get any hops smell. Well, Oh, what am I doing? Let's bring it up closer to the camera for the pour. The pour. Fortunately, I've got enough to make this a little more meaningful than what I botched here. Alright, so the pour. I'm pouring both of these in there. Kind of a hazy beer, orange like I thought, about the color I thought. Yeah, I would have thought it might be a little darker, but not really. That's a pretty orange beer. Dark amber, I'd call it orange. I like the color, honestly. Got a nice fine head to it. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Look at that, huh? I'll tell you what. I was going to pour 3 of them in here, but I don't know that I want to drink 3 beers this time of night right now. You might get the wrong opinion of me. You might not. Alright. So that's what it looked like. Let me move my cameras or my candles back. And we'll get into the drink. Now, I actually flew to a little town. Well, I flew to a NATO air base back in the early 90s when I was active duty military still. And it was Bitburg, Germany, where they have a big brewery there. It's in Bavaria. A NATO air base there. It's probably still there in Bitburg, Germany. And I went up to a little town called Geilenkirchen and took out a room above a tavern that had been there since the 1700s, Jabusch. And the family had run that place for almost 400 years at that point. Actually 300 years or so. And the family still was. Yet the guy, his kids worked there and he still worked there. And I got in some beer drinking there. I went to Bitburg. When I was in Bitburg, I hired a cabbie. I spoke some German at the time. And I asked the guy, I told him what I was doing there. I wanted beer. And I asked him to bring me to a beer store. I gave him $100, or I don't know, whatever it was in Deutschmarks then. And said, just drive me around for a few hours and show me where to buy beer. And I bought all kinds of German beer and took it, to my hotel room. And that's when I was staying above. That wasn't. I was in Geilenkirchen the other time. Actually, this time I was staying above Hotel Mosella, which was right next to their brewery in Bitburg. But I bought a lot of beer, and some of it was Maibach, and drank that, and it was a pretty unique experience. I remember it being a very strong beer, honestly. All right, so I better get to this dinky little glass of beer I've got here. I smell malt. It smells sweet. Doesn't really, no floral hop smell. So on to the taste. Oh, that is good. That is good. It tastes like it smells. Kind of sweet, malty, caramelish. But it's got a hops after notes. You get in the middle and the back of the mouth, the hops come in, and you get this sweet sugary up front, candy, almost candy-like. So you get honestly a bittersweet out of this, which is what I like in a beer, because my favorite Guinness Stout, extra stout, is bittersweet, but in a different kind of way, a molasses with bitterness, and this is more toffee caramel, sweet, with the hops bitterness follow up, and it goes down easy. It's a good beer. Worthy of the accolades I read off. I'll tell you that much. Would I buy it again? I'll let you know in a bit. So here's a beer drinking story from when I was in the Hotel Mosella. I think Mosella was the a small river that winds through the area by Bitburg. And I got there and they were having a big beer festival. They had this thing and it looked like a giant copper doorknob in the middle of their village square. Small city, really, very small. And it looked like a giant copper doorknob, about as big as the room I'm in. But actually it had taps of beer going off all around it, and just people were drinking beer like crazy there. And I caught the last day of that. But I went into the bar. Of course, there was a bar in the hotel I was staying in. And before I got involved in that night of festivities, you know, beer drinking, I sat down at the bar to have a glass of beer. And it was a Friday, I think, a weekend starting. And right next door to this hotel was Germany's largest brewery at the time, which was Bitburg, for Bitburg Pils, which you can buy around. It's a decent Pilsner. And all these German guys are in there drinking beer. And I'm an American. I kind of stood out a little bit then. You know, I was about 30 years old then, right? And they're asking me, they're speaking English for the most part, and I'm speaking a little German. They want to know what I'm doing there. And I said, me? I got all their attention, right? I said, well, I'm here to drink your beer. And they liked that. Like, yeah. I come to, you know, whatever, getrunken unser Bier. I don't know how they say it in German. They all like that. He's all right. So it comes time for me to order a beer, right? And they're all watching me, right? They're very proud of their beer in that town. And I ordered beer, and they took their time pouring me the perfect glass of what would be their beer, Bitburger Pils, which they brew. Everybody in that bar probably worked for the brewery, as did their fathers and grandfathers and such. So they're watching me very carefully, you know, to see what I think of their beer. I've come all the way from America to drink their beer. I didn't do this on purpose. This is just me being all right, this is how I reacted when I drank their beer. Poured perfectly in a Pilsner glass. They time it, you know. They make sure it's perfect. I said, do you have anything else? I'm not making this up. They were mad. They were angry with me. Some of them were. One of them says, and what is wrong with our beer? I'm looking around, all of a sudden I got all these hostile looking people at me. I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong with your beer at all. It's a good beer. I said, I like dark beer. I wanted a dark beer. And I don't know, they said some things, and I said, this is a real good beer. And I drank it, you know, realizing my mistake. And it was a good beer. I wasn't lying. And I wasn't lying. I would have rather had a dark beer. At that point, they just ignored me. Nobody gave me. One guy talked to me. That was it. I told him some of my family, you know, my last name is German. Though I'm mostly British and Scandinavian, honestly, for whatever. But, you know, when I say British, Scotch, English, Irish, the usual mix, and some Scandinavian, actually. But there's little German, and they were Mennonites that came to America. So I thought I could maybe reestablish myself in good graces by telling these people that some of my ancestors came from that region, Switzerland, Bavaria, and they were German Mennonites. And they like that. They like that. They said, ah, Minneneuten, yeah, Minneneuten, yeah. At this point, I started ignoring them. But that's my beer story for that. Really ain't much to it, but this is actually better than the Maibach I had when I was there. I got the Maibach in these great big green bottles that were wrapped up real fancy with like green foil around the top. Maibach, and it was. I remember it being a very strong beer, as in really strong alcohol-wise. I thought it was. I thought it was good beer, but it's nothing you couldn't buy it in America at that time. You couldn't buy it, even if you wanted to. I don't think they had it anywhere. It was kind of a specialty beer then in Germany. So, how's this compared to their Maibach? Actually favorable. I tell you don't have to go to Europe or Britain to get good beer anymore. Back when I was in my 20s and such, you couldn't get beers that I like, British and European beers. Those real Pilsners, I'm talking real Pilsners, like from Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, and you couldn't get a lot of this stuff. The Maibachs, you can now. I will say that I've yet to have any good Pilsners brewed in America that compare with European Pilsners. But I'm not really a big fan of the style Pilsner. Oh my God, that is good. I paid $2.69 for one of these cans at the grocery store. In this case, it would have been Grand Union, formerly Tops, Grand Union now, in Cortland, New York. I bought 3 of them. I think 2 will suffice. I have to work tomorrow, but I go in late. Today was the day off. Not much else going on in my life right now, other than just day-to-day, work and thinking about moving. Trying to take care of my dog, who's got a lot of problems, skin problems, and like trying to figure out if he's got food allergies or what. I'm going to take him to the vet, but bless his heart, he's not doing too good. Man, I don't know, this big glass, this is a fairly heavy beer. I wouldn't call it a light beer by any means. Very filling, but very drinkable. And man, it's going to be a job getting to the murky depths of this one. Oh man, I'll tell you a beer drinking story when I was about 18 or 19. Because I'm not going to slam this beer, I'm sorry. I got to fill this up with something, beer talk. My friends and I were bullhead fishing and up along Sodas Point. And it was nighttime. That's the nice thing. You get a bunch of fishing poles and some lanterns, and you build yourself a little fire, get yourself a bunch of beer, and steak, food to eat, to cook over the fire, frying pan, and you just chill out, You sit there all night, and just goof off and tell stories, and you got a whole bunch of poles in the water. They're just standing, you're not hanging on to them. You put them on a stick, like a forked stick, and if you get a hit, you see it, and then you grab it and reel in your bullhead, which are darn good eating. Very good eating. So we're bullhead fishing, and we had a little fire going, and we're drinking some beer. We're teenagers. And my friend, they had some dairy cattle, and they slaughtered one, so he brought a bunch of steak. And we're frying up all this steak in this old frying pan on this fire, and we've all eaten our fill of steak, and we're drinking beer, and we're goofing off. And this car pulls up. And it's nighttime, probably like 10 o'clock or so. And this kid gets out. I'll never forget, this guy's got to be, he's my age. We were all like 18 years old then or so. He gets out of the car and he walks up to the fire. Nobody knew him. And a white guy. And he had a military haircut. That means it's bald on the side and just a little bit on top. Come to find out, this guy just got out of Marine Corps boot camp, right? And he was home on leave, and he wanted to have fun to party, and he saw our fire. And I don't know, just thought he'd join us. So we didn't have a problem with that. Nobody knew him, but. Well, let me say the first thing that I remember him doing. He had a metal Zippo lighter. You know, the Zippo, the metal type where you flip it open and you light a flint. And it's got, regular lighter fluid burner, little flame. Old school metal Zippo lighter, like most of us did back then. Well, he thought he was pretty slick because he would light it on the side of his head. And he'd go like, he had this Marine Corps haircut, and he'd put a cigarette in his mouth and he'd go, ching ching, and he'd light a cigarette, right? Like he'd open it this way, the metal cap off the lighter, and then he would do the striker this way and it would light. So he'd go ching ching and he'd have it lit, which that was his cool thing, And he did that a couple times. And my friend elbows me, points, just look at the side of his head. And he cut the side of his head open, not real bad, but his side of his head was bleeding. This guy's drinking beer with us, right? And then he notices the steak in the frying pan in the fire that nobody's interested in anymore because we all ate a lot of steak that night. And we weren't interested in it. But there was a steak in the frying pan, still sizzling away in the fire. What he didn't know, and this may gross a few of you out, so plug your ears, was that we all kind of, in our beer drinking teenage ways, at nighttime, peed on that steak and the fire. Each of us. Just nothing else to do. Nobody was interested in the steak. So it was a target. Well, he's like, oh, I could use that steak. And I said, no. And my friend stopped me and said, no, let him. My friend was so devious, man. Dan Lefevre was his name. Just passed away a couple years ago. To Dan. Or as we used to call him back then, we called him Ski. Ski. Kowalski. I don't know how that came to be because his name was Lefevre. You know how it is when you're teenagers, you know. So I'm like, no, you don't want it. And he just said, no. And we're just, wow. I look at my friend, he's like, all right, we let him, right? Guy starts chowing down on this steak. And everybody pissed him in his frying pan. And I'm sorry. I probably lost a few more of my viewers at this point. But I still see this guy eating that steak, saying it was some of the best steak he ever had. And see some of the juices coming out, where he's really just chowing down on it like a caveman. I don't know what to tell you. But we never told him about that. It's just as well. We all had a good laugh on that one for a long time. And, this guy had a good time. He didn't know, there was no harm done, really. And he went his merry way eventually. And that's that story. Oh, man. Scandinavian. My grandmother was from Scotland. And her last name was Randolph. So I tried to look, I didn't even know her. So I got interested in that, the Scottish side of the family. My father never told me that he didn't, she died in like 1920. My grandmother died 100 years ago or more. And she was a young woman then. And my dad never talked much about her. But it came out that she was Scottish. She had a really thick Scottish accent. So I looked up Randolph clan. What's my Scottish tartan look like? I'm going to go down that road, to pay a tribute to my grandmother that I never got to know. Don't even know where she's buried to this day. No difference to make. But Randolph clan is actually the Bruce, the kings of Scotland. The Randolph clan is the first blood link to the very first Bruce of Scotland, who was a Viking. Elgud the Elder was a Viking and was the first Bruce of Scotland, or king. And my daughter did a DNA test, and a lot of my Scottish side used to live on the Orkney Islands and up around that area. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit of a barbarian yet, I guess. It's a good excuse, isn't it? Can't say much for the head retention on this. It's still fizzy. It's not flat by any means. And then again, I did pour two of these cans in there. And I was very careful to wash this mug out. I forgot to do the temperature check. But I will tell you, this has been in the fridge for a while. So it's fairly cold. And there's no soap. See, if you're not careful with a glass and there's any soap residue at all in your glass, it will completely kill the head on your beer. So you have to be sure that there's no soap residue in your mug, or you're not going to get any head at all on it. Right? Won't taste too good either. Oh man. Play a song. Scottish song. Banks of Spey. Something to fill the time. That's a heavy beer. I'm kind of full. That was the Banks of Spey. That is a Scottish Strathspey, probably from around 1700. Just music I got into I've got to give my mother credit for getting me into that kind of music. Long time ago. Reaching the end of this. I'm a little disappointed that the head didn't hold up better on it. Maybe it's the mug I'm using, I don't know, but not much head left. There's no head on this at all at this point. That is a little disappointing. How could they fix that? Honestly, if this was a beer that I brewed, I would leave the yeast in it. They filtered the yeast out. If they didn't filter the yeast out, there'd be a sediment at the bottom of the yeast-colored sediment, like a vanilla, whatever, colored sediment, off-white. And they filter it out. Honestly, they should have left it in. And it's pure vitamin B12. I mean, if you drink too much beer, the one thing, among other health risks that it has, is it depletes your B12. And you know what? They filter out the yeast. That's pure vitamin B12. And they take it out because it doesn't look good, or they think it gives the beer an off flavor. I don't think it does at all. If I get it's very hard to find a beer with the yeast in it. I usually swirl it around because I want to drink the yeast. Get it, off the bottom. So I think it will also, if you leave the yeast in, it'll condition and it'll continue to improve in the can. And it will also carbonate the beer some as that yeast continues to work on any fermentable sugars left in the beer. So if they would have left the yeast in here, there'd still be a head on my beer. I guarantee you that. And that's how they could improve this beer quite a bit. If I might give my 2 cents worth. Puppy. You don't know, he's underneath right by my feet, going to town. He's got problems licking himself raw, hot spots. Come on, pal. Yeah, get him to the vet. Come on, pal. You're good. We'll take care of it. Well, let's get to the end of this beer and this beer review. I'm working on some new songs. I'm fighting back the temptation to play them right now. Not quite there yet with them. Not quite, but I'm learning some new material. I sit out back, and tonight I didn't, just so I could do this review. Because right now it's pretty stuffy in my house in August, and outside it's very beautiful out under the open sky. It's very nice out back. And we endure the winters here in upstate New York, which are harsh. The most snowfall in America, right here. So the locals here and the wildlife, we all love the summer. But I stayed inside just to do this beer review. And another video that I made earlier, more serious, had a cup of tea for that one. Voices from a doomed aircraft. Since a haunting story from my childhood years. And I finally had some answers today to who these people were and what happened to them. 55 years later. So if you're curious, tune into that one. So I'll put a link to it, maybe. All right, hey, to the murky depths, huh? Oh yeah, to the murky depths, which I've reached. Would I buy this beer again? Yes. It's a very good tasting beer, very good tasting, reasonably priced, fairly strong, so you don't need to buy too much of it. Whatever, it's good, I'm good. My only complaint was the head didn't last. This thing kind of fizzled out flat about halfway through this review. And, that's to be expected, and it could have been remedied if they just would have left the yeast in the beer. But they don't. And I wish they would. So there you have it, Rogue Brewery's Dead Guy Ale. Even they make concessions. That Dead Guy Ale and the picture on it's kind of a little off. But it's the brand. The beer sold well, won a lot of awards, so why change it? Makes sense to me. All right. Good night. Good day. Whatever. Good morning. You like beer? Maibach? Any beer? Try this if you haven't.